web chat, or actually it's our COVID-19 and ABE updates webinar. Glad to see all of you at least virtually. Hopefully you are all doing all right. Today is Friday, April 3rd, 2020, and today sharing with you we'll have staff from the Minnesota Department of Education, from Literacy Action Network, and from our Minnesota Adult Basic Education Distance Learning team. So we won't have all the staff introduce them at this point, but I just wanted to let you know, my name is Brad Haskamp. Joining us on this webinar today, we have Todd, Astrid, Jody, and Julie from our state office. We also have Carla providing technical assistance today. And we have Susan and Tom that will be sharing some information from Literacy Minnesota's Distance Learning team and from the Literacy Action Network. We are going to ask you to please hold your questions until we get to the questions section. We have a lot of slides today and a lot of information to share with you, so we want to make sure that we can get through it all. So please hold your questions till the end. And when we get to that point, you can type in your questions using the webinar's chat function, or you can click on to raise your hand and ask your question over the phone, and we'll unmute you during that question and answer period. I also want to let you know, if you click on the materials tab, that you can see all the materials we have for you today, including today's slides. There are 6 different types of materials, so we'll be walking through some of those throughout the session, but make sure you download those as well today. And again, if you're having any technical assistance needs, please contact Carla Vian and she can help you out. Today, we're going to try to cover some key messages and updates for all of you. We're going to talk about resources and professional development, distance learning, Literacy Action Network has an update. We will be sharing ABE grants, funding, and hours, partner updates, and then we have some time for discussion for you. And we'll make sure that we have time for questions as well. As always, all of the resources from this webinar and our earlier communications can be found online at mnabe.org if you click on State ABE Presentations, and the link is right there. Also, if you download the materials, you'll be able to get the link from that location as well. So let's kick off. I'm going to turn it over to Todd Wagner to share some key messages from our office. Todd?
Thanks, Brad. So, hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I had lost my audio there for a minute, so I had a little minute of panic, but glad to be back with you. We just wanted to start out today with a big thank you to everybody in the ABE community. The response that we have seen from everybody in responding to the current disruptions has just been amazing and inspiring. And so we really wanted to send a special thank you out to staff, all the staff at ABE programs across the state, in all the amazing ways that you're adapting to the current situation. And also a specific thank you to our colleagues in all the ABE support network providers for the quick revision on plans and changing in-person events to online events. And it's just been an incredible and an amazing thing to experience. So thank you. And next slide, Brad. So also, we just wanted to really kind of take a minute to just really acknowledge the fact that this has been quite a heavy lift, and it looks now like it's quite likely to go on for an extended period of time. Certainly that seemed to be what the governor was indicating is most likely during his address yesterday. And so I guess we also wanted to just pass along to you that like us, we're also trying to remember that we're in this for the long haul, and that we need to take care of ourselves and each other. That's, you know, students that we have been serving also obviously have other constraints and life responsibilities, and it may be a difficult time for some students to engage right now. We've also heard that for others, folks have in fact, have more time at the moment. Maybe they've lost a job or have some other life circumstance that makes it possible for them to study. So both things are true across the spectrum of students in our system. And just to encourage all of you to really take care of each other, know that we can't do everything immediately, know that the system is robust and everything doesn't have to be perfect and done right now. And so we're trying to just every now and then stop and take a moment to breathe and encourage you to do the same thing. Next slide, Brad. So just wanted to quickly revisit the goals that are guiding our work at MDE. That is, number one goal is still safety for all the students in our system, all the staff working in our system, and doing our part as the ABE community in supporting our communities generally in being as healthy as possible and flattening the curve by working at a distance and basically all of us working from home. So a second big goal for us is that given the above, given the first goal, we are still have the goal of providing as much service as possible to as many students throughout any periods of closure and disruption as possible. And as I mentioned earlier, really the response from the ABE community has been just amazing. So once again, super impressive, and thank you so much for all your amazing work. And then the third for us at MDE is we are really focused on doing everything we can do along with our support network colleagues in supporting all of you in all the work that you're doing in providing direct service to students and or in working to build capacity in your program to increasingly have the capability to provide programming at a distance. Next slide. So just a reminder once again about current year funding. The awards for 2019-20 were made way back almost a full year ago. They will not change. They're in place through June 30th of 2020. So given that, and given the fact that staff can and should be encouraged to work from home, staff should focus on providing remote instruction to students, and to the extent that you have staff whose time isn't being taken up with direct instruction, this is an opportunity for those staff to participate in professional development, program planning for things going forward, building capacity for service delivery, etc. So main message here is that there's lots of work for all of us to do. The money is in place. And from our perspective, MDE perspective, there should be no need for staff layoffs during the COVID disruption. Next slide, Brad. So just another kind of key message around funding, especially for the month of April. So for essentially this next not quite 5-week period, provide instruction at a distance as much as possible with the best quality possible. That's goal number one, really. And then the second would be, to the extent that there is staff availability and time, use that time to build your capacity as a program and as a staff to serve students at a distance. Don't worry about the funding. It is there and in place and guaranteed through June 30th. Next slide, Brad. With regard to contact hours, I just want to again remind you that really you should be focusing on providing all instructional opportunities to your students that you can in any ways that work, whether that is online and electronically, or whether that is through other sorts of resources, packets, guided use of workbooks, and provide that service regardless of whether or not you can currently count contact hours for those activities. So We are adhering to all our existing policies and requirements around contact hour accounting, but programs need not worry about any decline in contact hours because, and Brad, if you'd go to the next slide, we will, and I'm looking at bullet number 2 here on this slide, we will be using the contact hours that Minnesota ABE programs recorded from March 14th of 2019 to March 13 of 2020 when we calculate grants for the 2021 program year. So it's likely that without any, not likely, it's essentially certain that without some sort of legislative change, the appropriation for adult basic ed for 2021 will be essentially level funding. It can move around a little bit based on prior year cap amounts, but for all intents and purposes, it would be level funding. And we would be using a full year's worth of contact hours that were counted during normal operating procedures for purposes of operating the formula. So again, focus for the rest of this month through the end of April, certainly, your focus should be on providing the best service possible to the most students possible and or having staff working on building program capacity. What happens in terms of contact hours starting after May 1st is still a bit of an unknown, but we are working closely with land leadership in their efforts to address ABE related issues, including contact hours going forward. So stay tuned. Next slide, Brad. And then one last issue I just want to sort of make sure is on people's radar screens is that the shift to providing more programming at a distance does introduce some additional data privacy concerns that many of us perhaps have not had to be concerned about because we maybe haven't been involved directly in distance education, or perhaps we just it hasn't been a large focus of our programs. And so I just wanted to get you to think about, be mindful that there are data privacy concerns, that there are sensitivities among different students that we serve around issues having to do with photo or video images of themselves. There's our cultural considerations as well. As you think about that, just wanted to share really 2 things with you. The first is that in our system, it's really the policies and requirements of the employing entity, so your school district or other organization, those policies are the policies that come first. But in many cases, those policies may not be fully developed at this point. I know this has been a big issue, both in the K-12 system and in the higher ed system, sort of bringing people up to speed on the implications of distance ed for data privacy. And so given that, just wanted to point out a couple of resources to you that we have found enlightening. They are just examples of guidance from other systems. Both of them are attached as resources to this webinar. So the first is an FAQ that the Minnesota State Office of the Chancellor Legal Counsel put out, directed at Min-State teaching faculty, that is I think enlightening to review. And the second is from the Federal Department of Education student data privacy folks, and this is the link is included in the slide here, and it's just a site. You can see the title, Protecting Student Privacy While Using Online Educational Services, Requirements and Best Practices. I would encourage all programs that at least to take a look at those and see if they provide any insights that are helpful along with your local organization requirements. Next slide, Brad. And then just the last thing for me is just to remind you that the FAQ document is out there on our mnabe.org website. We are adding to that as we have the chance, both responding to questions that we get during the webinars and also questions that are coming in to us directly from folks via email or phone calls. So we will endeavor to have that updated through any questions asked on the chat today by sometime next week, and we'll keep you alert to when we update that FAQ. Okay, thanks again, everybody, and I'm going to turn it back over to Brad.
Thank you, Todd. One other update I want to share is about NRS testing. So there has been a new update today or this week, and that is that Best Plus has now approved a distance testing option. So I don't think we have very many consortia though across the state that are using Best Plus, but it's good to know that one publisher has already made this move. We are keeping in touch and working with, talking to CASA's staff and TABE staff about that option, and both of those companies are exploring that as well. It is important to know, as we're talking about distance testing, we're really talking about testing on a computer. So for programs that are doing computer-based testing, this may be an easier jump than for programs that have been doing paper-based testing. And as there are new updates, as anything gets approved, the Minnesota Department of Education's ABE team and our state assessment trainers, Marty Olson and Linda Keller in particular, are working on this, and we will keep you posted as new developments arise. Also talking about testing, let's talk about GED testing. So there are, GED testing service is exploring other testing options. Again, maybe virtual testing at a distance. And we at the Minnesota Department of Education will be meeting with GED testing service staff later on this month, and we've been talking with them ongoing, and we're going to be continuing to explore these options. I will say though, any developments that arise will not happen this month. So if you're thinking that you might be able to turn on GED testing at a distance in the next couple of weeks, that will not be the case. But I ask you to please stay tuned, and we will do our best, and we're going to keep exploring those options, and GED testing service is working hard to see what can be done. In the meantime, for GED students, there is some GED Educator Support that I wanted to share with you. That GED Testing Service has pulled together a couple of really outstanding resources. Both they did Tuesdays for Teachers this week, and that was so popular they had to set up a second airing of that webinar, and both of them completely booked. There were so many people that were interested in that session. Luckily, if you were not able to participate, you can find that recording at the Tuesdays for Teachers webinar recordings link on the slide here. Although they also have it, along with other COVID-19 educator resources, on the COVID-19 Educator Support page. So both of these links, which you'll be able to find in the materials section, are available to you to look at, either watch the recordings or download or look at other resources that GED Testing Service is supporting or developing. So let's move to the survey. So we asked you last week to talk about the survey or to fill out a survey about COVID-19 and your ABE programming. Thank you all. During that course of the week that the survey was up, we had 322 of you respond. Thank you for your feedback. That is extremely valuable. What are some things that we found? Well, first off, of those 322 people that responded, 220 were ABE instructors, and 53 were either consortium managers or program administrators. And then we had 41 support staff, that filled out the survey, and 8 navigators, counselors, or staff in other roles. What you told us is that your top 3 challenges in planning and or implementing distance education, really it's about the students. One, that students are lacking access to devices. And also, they maybe don't have the skills for distance education tools, and that students are having trouble accessing the internet. Those are the top 3 choices. Now, granted, as you can see on the list, all of the options really did have several responses. And we also read in the other, for those of you that put other responses, that many of you said all of these are a big problem. It's hard to narrow it down to my top 3. So I encourage, we heard you, and but that is helpful to know that the top 3 issues revolve around students and their access and skills. What is encouraging though, is that not nearly 80% of responders, when they filled this out, said their ABE programming was already offering distance education. And in particular, we found that synchronous instruction and distance learning platforms were the most popular forms of instruction, with a vast majority of people saying that that is what their program is offering. That was outstanding to hear, that all of you have moved so quickly. And we've compiled the top 8, according to you, the top 8 distance education tools and resources that you are using include the number 1, the top 8 include packets and workbooks, instruction via email or phone, Zoom, Read Theory, MobiMax, Google Docs, and Edmentum. Those were the top 8 responses, and how you have immediately reacted and implemented distance education options. So as we look at the survey, the ABE team at the Minnesota Department of Education, and we're going to work with our ABE support network providers, especially our distance learning team, to really continue to dive into this data, analyze responses, and think about what that means for our plans for future professional development and technical assistance with distance education. We also know what we heard from you is that administrators prefer webinar updates and teachers prefer email updates generally. We plan to continue both in the future, but we might not be doing quite as many webinars as we have been doing, meaning we might not be doing 1 or 2 webinars a week here. And we do also know that some of you requested an individual response. Please note that we'll start reaching out to you via email next week to discuss your questions. Okay, Astrid, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about resources and professional development.
Great, thank you, Brad, and good morning, everybody. It's great to see all of your names on the list, and thank you for being here, and I really look forward to the time when we can all get together in person again. So Brad, let's go to the next slide here. We want to make sure that everyone is staying updated with all of the latest information, and you have an opportunity to connect with colleagues around the state, even though we're working from our homes. Just a reminder that we have established a new COVID-19 and distance education resource hub on Schoology. Over 200 people have already joined, and there are some great discussions happening on the group. Here are some instructions to get on to that Schoology group. Just a reminder that this is a group, not a course. So when you go in, you'll need to enter an access code to join a group. And there are some detailed, more detailed slides about how to navigate the Schoology group once you're in there in the PowerPoint from our last webinar last week. I also just want to note that we have been seeing Schoology experiencing some increased traffic, particularly in the morning. I think when many K-12 students may be accessing their Schoology accounts. So please don't give up if you are trying to join and aren't able to get in or are trying to access it. Just encourage you to check back a little bit later. They have been going in and out with Schoology access, and hopefully that will get resolved over time. Let's go to the next slide, Brad. Just an overview of some of the things that you can find there. We've got a number of different discussion threads as well as resource folders, many focused on distance learning, both synchronous and asynchronous using distance learning platforms, discussion and resources around instructional resources that people are using, both teaching about COVID-19 and other instructional resources, information about community resources and mental health resources, resources for parents and families, and for specific student populations. So please get in there, share what's working for you, ask questions, and check out what your colleagues are doing. We have support service network folks checking multiple times per week to answer your questions and share things that they're finding. Let's go to the next slide, Brad. Also want to mention a national resource hub and communication forum through the Links platform. So if you want to hear what is happening in other states, share ideas with colleagues from around the country, you'll need to create a free account at links.ed.gov. And once you're in there, there is a COVID-19 support for adult educators, as well as a number of different discussion groups. Particularly the technology discussion group has been quite robust with people sharing what's working in different parts of the country. So that's another opportunity to connect with colleagues. Next slide. Here in Minnesota, our colleagues over at Atlas have launched a new series of ABE teacher virtual coffee breaks. So this is a really informal opportunity to get together with folks from around the field, as well as Atlas staff, to talk about what's working. How are you managing to teach in this new landscape? We had an ELA teacher coffee break earlier this week that pulled together over 30 educators from around the state, sharing lots of great resources and supporting each other. The Atlas staff will be creating resource folders on the Schoology group to archive some of the ideas that are shared from these coffee breaks. Looking ahead to next week and the following weeks, you'll see there are math, ESL, reading, and GED coffee breaks being planned. So you can register for those on the Atlas calendar. The next slide, we've really transitioned to doing all virtual PD at this time, and we have a number of upcoming webinars in April and May. April 17th, we will have the session that state staff offered at the spring Metro Regional will be offered in a virtual format. We'll give some updates around IET, WIOA, accountability, and professional development. So managers in particular, hope you'll join us for that one. If you attended at the Metro session, you don't need to attend again. ESL teaching from a distance with colleagues from Atlas and Literacy Minnesota. A couple of SID end of year prep webinars by our Urban Planet colleagues. A very timely ACES webinar focused on navigating systems. We'll look at how to support your students in navigating the many systems that they may need to be navigating during this time of a pandemic. And then Burlington English is hosting a couple of different webinars, one focused on using Zoom and another getting up and running quickly to serve students online, and there are multiple dates and times for those. So again, head over to the Atlas calendar to get registered for any of those webinars. Let's go to the next slide, Brad. Also just want to remind everybody that we do have a Minnesota ABE PD YouTube channel. This is an excellent resource, particularly if you are finding yourself with a little extra time for professional development. You want to go back and review things. Many of our past webinars are archived. There are webinars on distance learning platforms, so you can go and see some of the recent webinars on Khan Academy, on Read Theory, on an overview of distance learning and blended learning. Great opportunity to brush up on those platforms. So you can access that at our PD YouTube channel. What you're seeing now are the various playlists that are available, and if you click into those, you can see the individual videos. Okay, let's go on. Also, just a reminder that our colleagues at Panda do have a robust section of their website focused on mental health resources. This is a very challenging time for all of us, for all of our students. So you can head over to the Panda website to see both the COVID-19 mental health resource guide that they've posted there, as well as other links with tips on how to manage stress and anxiety right now. And finally, just a reminder that this is a really important time to stay connected and be reading your MN ABE Connect newsletter. It comes to your inbox every Tuesday. If you are not getting the newsletter, you can go onto the Atlas website and sign up to receive that newsletter. There have been a number of recent articles that are out there to help us navigate this new landscape, looking at resource considerations, teaching ACES-TIF in the time of COVID, standards-based activities focused on navigating the community and expanding distance learning in Minnesota ABE. And our support network staff will be putting in articles every week, as well as inviting educators from around the field to share what's working with them. So that's a great way to stay connected with the rest of the field. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to our colleagues, Tom and Susan, to talk about some distance learning updates.
Hi, everybody. How are you this morning?
Hi, Tom.
We could maybe go to the next slide. So we don't have a huge number of new things to talk about today, but a few things we would like to update you on. We've gotten quite a number of requests for approving new approvals of DL platforms. And listed here are the ones that have recently been approved. I think all of them except Quill are now on the website. Quill will be on there early next week, that are available for your use. So I encourage you to look through those, use the filtering function if you're looking for something specific. And both the platforms on this list that are relevant to your search, as well as those that already have been there for some time, will come up. We're hoping that will make it much easier for people to choose the platforms that will be useful for their students. If we can go on to the next slide. We're in the middle of looking at these three for possible approval. We haven't made a final decision on any of them. We're waiting for some additional material on all of them. One of the things we are trying to do is not approve multiple platforms that all cover exactly the same sort of material, because it starts to become extremely confusing. I don't believe we have a slide on it, but one of the issues that we're really going to be looking at very intensely in the next couple of weeks is trying to develop some sort of a process to approve teacher-generated materials that take place within an LMS. And there are a number of questions, practical and policy questions about that. We're getting a lot of interest from the field about trying to create those kinds of materials. So that's going to be a priority for us over the next few weeks, is trying to figure out a process that will work in terms of approving those.
Hey, Tom?
Yes.
If I jump in for a second?
Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. This is Susan. So I did want to let everybody know that we are making some progress on figuring out how teacher-created courses could be approved. And one of the things that's come to my attention this week from a couple of teachers who've submitted questions to the DL support desk is that there are a couple of learning management systems that do have a software system for tracking time on task. And that's very different from a lot of learning management systems that don't have that functionality. So we're looking into those platforms to see if that might be the way we want to go for ABE. So stay tuned for more information about that. And thanks to the teachers who submitted those questions, because they were really helpful.
Yes. If we can go on to the next slide. Just wanted a couple of words about our webpage filters. And we would certainly welcome feedback on how well this is working for all of you, because it's a working process. It is definitely functional. But one of the things we can do is add additional filters as we have those requests. So if you go to the page when you have time, look at the filters that are there. And if you see any that don't respond to your particular needs, if you could send an email to our support email, that would be really helpful, because then we can talk with our web developer and get those added as soon as is necessary. We did add GED to the list of filters. That was somehow inadvertently left off the initial list, and through an oversight, that has now been put on there. So that should make that a little bit easier to find GED related materials. We go on to the next slide. Don't have a lot to say about online intake, but this is definitely an emerging issue and probably will become more and more important as time goes on. I do know that some consortia and programs are figuring out how to do this already. So our team will be working with the state staff to develop some resources and procedures and best practices on how best to accomplish this. Susan, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Not at this time. We're definitely focused on it as an issue, but we don't really have answers yet, but we're going to keep working on it.
Okay. Okay, if we can go on to the next slide. I think this is leftover from just a repeat from last time, but these are still really good resources for you to look at. The weekly webinars that are being held every Friday by the EdTech webinar are particularly useful. We're getting really good feedback from people who have the time to take part in those. Although if we all took part in all the webinars that were available, probably we would get nothing else done but attending webinars all day, every day. So I understand that all of us have to make some choices about what seems to be the most relevant for us. To the next slide. Susan, do you want to talk about this? You want me to talk about this?
I can if you'd like, sure.
We can
so yeah, I know you've been talking a lot. Maybe it's my turn, right?
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
So last week we had said that we had thought that the commissioner did not have the authority to change the contact hour reporting period. And after even further and closer evaluation of the statutory language, we have come to understand that that is actually incorrect. And our original understanding that the commissioner could make that determination is the correct one. So the statute had actually been changed, and I think it was in 2006. So we can work with the Department of Ed to change that contact hour reporting period. And so LAN is going to no longer ask the legislature to act on that because we don't believe the legislature needs to do so. So we are going to focus our legislative efforts on increasing funding and fixing the growth factor. And this is really important as we're heading into what is likely to be a pretty deep recession. And we know that during times of recession, ABE services are in high demand. And without increased funding and a resolution to the growth factor issue, we're not going to be able to scale up to meet that increased demand. So it's going to be increasingly important that we focus on increasing funding for adult basic education, and that's where we're going to focus our efforts. Tom, if you would like to add anything to that, go ahead.
No, just that it's an effort that's ongoing. We're all working together very conscientiously to try to make sure that everything that needs to happen legislatively and procedurally is in place to enable us to continue serving our learners in the optimum ways we can under the overall circumstances we're all living through. So I think we go on to the next slide. That may be the end of our portion of the webinar. Yes, it is.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Susan. That's really helpful and excellent news. Jody, I'm going to turn it over to you for grants, funding, and hours.
Thanks, Brad. This is Jody, and before I launch into some kind of nitty-gritty stuff here, I just want to kind of echo what others have been saying, that it feels like in this moment, sort of the big irony is that community is even more important than ever. Even though I haven't seen any of you for quite a while now, it does feel really important and really positive to at least hear everybody and be connected in this way, even at a distance. So thanks to all of you for joining us, and I'm just really grateful for our community across our state. You can go on to the next slide, Brad. So I want to start by just reminding you that as of right now, none of our regular due dates have been changed. So that is true for the annual application, that is true for the 5-year narratives, it's true for IELCE or civics reporting, and for regional transitions plans. However, we all know that, the future is a little uncertain at this point, so there could possibly be some changes in the future. We're not anticipating those at this point, but if anything changes, we will be sure to communicate that clearly to you all. Next slide, Brett. So just a minute about the annual ABE grant application. So just a reminder, that will be due on June 1st, as it is every year. We are currently working with the grant staff at MDE to get those grant application materials posted on the MDE website. We will be giving you more information and support about that annual grant application workshop. We're going to do that in two ways. First, we will be recording a version of that workshop, and we'll post that online on our website sometime within the next couple weeks. And then we will do a live version of that workshop on our regularly scheduled web chat on May 6th. So we'll continue to remind you of those two opportunities, but just remember, you'll have another opportunity to get more in-depth information about the annual grant application, particularly for those of you who are consortium leaders and who are directly responsible for filling out and submitting that application. Next slide, Brett. Just one important thing to note about the annual grant application. It will include a Table A as usual, as it does every year. And that Table A will have the standard May 1 to April 30th date range. However, in addition to Table A, on the next slide, there will also be a table that we're calling Table A1. So on this table, you will be asked to report your consortium's hours for this updated contact hour reporting period. And last time when we talked to you, there was a little fuzziness about the dates, but we have the dates clear now. Those dates will be March 14th, 2019 to March 13th, 2020. So as you've heard a couple times already, that is the period of time that we will be using contact hours from that period to calculate the distribution of state and federal ABE funding for this upcoming fiscal year. So that is a new table in the annual application, so just want to make you all aware of that. And again, this is kind of reviewing what Todd has said earlier, but we want to be sure that you are hearing this message that our current year ABE funding is secure. Nothing that is happening right now threatens that funding. The current funding goes through June 30th of this year, and that funding can be used for staff, ABE staff, to work from home. It can be used to provide instruction to students at a distance, and it can also be used for staff to participate in professional development, planning, curriculum development, and other capacity building activities. Next slide, Brad. Also, just want to step back for a second and give you a bit of a reminder about the time periods that we're talking about, because I know that can get confusing. So when we're talking about the fiscal year and when we're talking about the fiscal year funding, that year is July 1st to June 30th. We have a different period of time for contact hour reporting, and traditionally that has been May 1st to April 30th. But note, the change for this particular year is the new contact hour reporting period will be March 14th, 2019 to March 13th, 2020, and that's for calculating the upcoming fiscal year's funding. So again, this is a repeat, but we just want to be really sure that you are hearing these key messages. So we are at the beginning of April, and as you are thinking about your work and your programming in April, big picture, these are what things you should be keeping in mind. Work on providing instruction at a distance as best you can, and work on building your staff and your program's capacity to serve students at a distance. And we have plenty of things to worry about, as we've said before, but don't worry about your funding for this year. And then second key message is, again, especially for the month of April, keep providing all the instructional opportunities to your students in all the ways you can, regardless of whether or not you can count contact hours for those activities. So really the message is, for the month of April, any decline in contact hours won't impact your funding for this upcoming year. So as we're thinking about April, again, things to keep in mind for the next several weeks for this month. We won't be having in-person classes with the slight caveat of correctional facilities. We recognize that's a different setting, and there may be some limited in-person instruction happening in correctional facilities, but otherwise across the state, we won't be meeting with ABE students in person. Our primary focus needs to be student and staff and community safety. So safety and health first. And after that, we are focusing on communicating with students, instruction at a distance, and building capacity. In April, please continue to record all contact and proxy hours in SID. We want to track, we want to know as best we can what's happening across the field in our state this year, or sorry, this month in April. So keep recording those hours in SID, your contact hours and your proxy hours, but also keep in mind that the hours that are generated in April sort of won't come into the mix in terms of figuring out next year's funding. So keep recording those hours, but don't worry about those hours being fewer than or lower than previous years or previous months. Next slide. Then, now I think we are getting to the point where some of you and some of us are starting to look ahead to May. When we hit May 1st of this year, that does start a new contact hour reporting period. So our team here at MDE, as well as the folks at Literacy Action Network, or LAN, we will continue to work towards our goal of holding all of our ABE programs harmless from the impact to contact hours of COVID-19. However, I think at this point, it is impossible to predict what impact COVID-19 is going to have on this upcoming contact hour reporting period. So we are unsure yet what adjustments might make sense to the upcoming contact hour reporting period. We probably honestly won't really have a really good view of that until almost a year from now, because we don't know what other disruptions of service we might have over the course of the upcoming year. So what that means is that starting May 1st, and this is the second bullet here, starting May 1st, the contact hours generated at that point may very well be used in the calculation of funding for the following fiscal year. So note that I'm talking a ways out into the future, right? I'm talking about how we would be calculating funding for fiscal year 2022, which starts on July 1st, 2021. So really the main message is, in April, you really don't need to be concerned about the total number of contact hours, for sure. Starting May 1st, the count starts over again. And at that point, it's possible that those hours could be used in the count to determine funding, but all of that is a ways off into the future. So we encourage you to stay engaged, stay informed, and we will be sure to communicate to you as promptly and as clearly as possible about what to expect in the future. Next slide, please, Brad. So again, thinking about May, we are looking at a possible change in May, not for certain yet, but possibly starting on May 1st of 2020, we may lift the 12-hour restriction in SID for students who don't have a pretest. And We will make that decision based on information that we are, currently sort of waiting for and figuring out. One question is, will we have the ability to do NRS assessments remotely or at a distance, like CASAs and TABE testing? That's an open question at this point. Another question is, what guidance will we be given from OCTAE, which is the Office of Adult Education at the U.S. Department of Education? So what guidance will we get at a federal or national level? So we are definitely looking at that, and again, want you to stay engaged and keep up to date, and we will communicate as clearly as we can over the upcoming weeks what the final decision on that is. Next slide, please. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about contact hours. Seems like this is one thing that there's a lot of discussion and questions across our field. In terms of allowable contact hours, I want to remind you that laws and policies around allowable contact hours have not changed. There have been no official changes in statute or policy about contact hours. However, important note, it is allowable to count contact hours for real-time instruction at a distance. You can use Skype or Zoom or Google Hangout or any other tool or the telephone. This is, in fact, not a change. And we did have a few ABE providers across the state who were already doing that kind of remote synchronous instruction, but most of us weren't. So I recognize that for many of you that feels like a change, but it's not actually a change in policy. It's just that far more of us are using this new kind of instruction where only a few folks were doing it, a little bit before now. Next slide, Brett. So reminder, we want you to keep recording contact hours in SID. We want you to record your contact hours for that real-time instruction at a distance. So that's using Zoom or using Skype or using any tools that you have. Any and all of those tools are acceptable to do that synchronous instruction. Whatever tools you and your students have available to you are great. In addition, you can be recording hours for intake, for educational counseling and advising. I'll say more about that in a second. And continue recording proxy hours in SID for distance learning the same way you always have. So the main message here is, please continue to record all allowable contact hours in SID as you always have. Next slide, Brad. So a few more details about kind of these different kinds of hours you'll be recording in SID or different situations. We know that there is a fair amount of synchronous distance instruction happening currently, which is great. We've heard about teachers using a lot of different tools to convene students in small groups or even in large groups and provide some instruction remotely, which is great. When you are doing that, record that in SID as contact hours. Those are not proxy hours, that is contact hour, regular contact hour time. We ask that you create new classes in SID when you are doing this. And we're asking you to follow this naming convention, which is to use the word online, then the name of the software or the tool that you're using for the class, and then the content. So we've got a couple examples here: online Skype, beginning ESL, online Zoom, GED prep. So we know this is new for a lot of people, and a lot of people are working from home, and everybody is trying to figure this out, and we recognize that, and we'll certainly think that we can all have a lot of grace for each other as we figure this out, and we might not get it all perfect for right now, but do your best and keep in touch with us and with SID support staff as you run into questions or problems around this. Next slide, Brad. In terms of entering hours in SID for counseling, You can enter hours for educational advising or educational counseling. You can enter that as contact hours, or within SID, you can enter those as counseling and testing hours, I think is the sort of the terminology used within SID. I encourage you to think about how you entered counseling and testing hours before our new reality. And just remember that the policies and the guidelines for what hours are countable have not changed. The main thing that has changed around this is that what used to happen in person is now often happening over the phone or over another video conferencing or online tool. But basically the hours you were entering before for activities that you were entering hours for before around counseling and advising, continue to enter those hours. And also another important note, we've been hearing that for many instructors and paras and other support staff, a lot of what sounds like you are spending your time doing is calling up students and helping them with their technology at home to get set up to be able to do distance learning, walking them through, connecting to the internet or getting on devices or downloading particular software or signing up for a particular DL platform. Though that time is countable as contact hour time, that is helping them be prepared and be able to participate in instructional hours. So yes, you can count that time as contact hours, or you could enter that time in SID as counseling and testing hours. Next slide, Brad. And you will also continue to enter hours for asynchronous distance learning. So we refer to these hours as proxy hours, and you can enter those for the approved distance learning platforms just the way you were before. So these are your hours, for students who are using MobiMax or Read Theory or Khan Academy, right? So continue to enter those the way you always have been. And note, as you heard from the distance learning team, that as a result of our current new normal, there are some new platforms that folks are using and promoting with students, and there are some additional platforms that have been approved recently. So keep your eyes on the distance learning website to stay up to date with what's approved for proxy hours for distance learning. Next slide. So also we want to acknowledge that there are other asynchronous activities that you may be doing with students. So the students might be watching a recorded video or a lesson. You might be using email. You might be using text messages. Many of you we've heard are using packets, handouts, workbooks. You might be mailing those things out to students. Those are valuable and important and worthwhile activities if that's what a student needs from you. However, those types of hours are not countable as contact hours or proxy hours. So please hear that we don't want you to stop doing those things. We want you to continue doing those things when and if those are the right things for your students and your community. However, there's been no change in the contact hour policy, so those hours are not countable for contact hours or proxy hours. Next slide. Another note, in SID, as many of you know, if a student does not have a pretest, it will stop you from entering hours when you get to 11.75. So you can't enter, you can only enter up to 12 hours for a student with no pretest. It's important to know, we do not expect you, if you run up against this block, that does not mean that you are being asked to stop serving that student. Please continue to serve that student, even if you run up against this logistical block in SID. And note that we are looking into whether it makes sense to change that block and lift that block starting May 1st. So just stay tuned for the final decision and information on that. Next slide. Excuse me. So to kind of give you a summary of the messages that we hope that you hear. We hope, particularly for this month of April, please focus on continuing to provide educational services. Please find all the ways that you can to help your students continue learning. And just, we recognize some of those ways will be entered as contact or proxy hours in SID, like delivering a class using Skype or Zoom, the things they're doing online using distance learning platforms. Maybe you're doing some one-on-one instruction over the phone. Great. We recognize there are other ways, other things you are doing that can't be entered as contact or proxy hours, and that's okay. That's good. You know, please continue to do all of the things that are right for your students and your community. So some of those things might include other distance learning platforms that aren't yet approved or aren't currently approved. You might be using email, you might be using text, and you might be using snail mail. Those things are worthwhile educational tools. At this point, those activities don't count for contact or proxy hours. So this is the main message we want you to hear. I think, and again, I will say, you know, all of this, all of our guidance and our decisions moving forward, there's a lot ahead of us and a lot of uncertainty. So we encourage you to keep engaged and keep informed and keep in contact with each other and with our team, and we'll just do our best to all stay as informed as we can as we move forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jody. I really appreciate that. There's a lot of information in those slides. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to share some of our partner updates. Julie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for hanging in there. The first thing I wanted to mention was, I believe it was Wednesday, April 1st was Census Day. And the census does bring in a lot of money for Minnesota and all the other states, but it only works if people are completing it. I did participate in a webinar where they were talking about how is COVID affecting like the census takers and getting out in the field. And so there's a lot of information out there. I've provided the links in these slide. In this slide, one of the things you might find interesting is you can monitor Minnesota's self-response rate, and you can see how we're doing overall. So as of yesterday, we were at like almost 50% of the households had responded. The issue here is, as we know, a lot of our adult basic education learners might be afraid to take the census, might not have the technology skills to take it online. So if you can assist in any way with that, that would be helpful. As I mentioned, this link here does provide like how to address individuals' fears, how to address different issues that might come up. But the main point is our learners, generally speaking, respect the teachers and instructors that work with them and trust them. And they say trust is a major factor in having people complete the census. Next slide, please.
And Julie, this is Astrid. I just want to jump in and say that I participated in an excellent webinar earlier this week focused on strategies and resources for supporting adult learners with the census. Mag Petridge was on that as well, and she took some excellent notes. I just received the recording of that webinar, and as soon as Schoology's up and running later today, I'll get that recording as well as Mag's notes posted on there.
Thanks, Astrid. Minnesota State course placement. We did receive a notice, and it is attached in your materials, that they are eliminating the standardized testing requirement. So the two main points are bulleted in this slide, but the second one, self-determined placement for students without a reportable high school GPA, which would include adult learners. So that's a huge plus. So keep that in mind if you're working with students who are possibly considering moving into post-secondary classes. Next slide, please. I have a request from all of you, especially the teachers, from our workforce partners. This would be our other WIOA titles, the adult, youth, dislocated worker. They are struggling to assess their clients. As you know, they also have requirements under WIOA to get an educational functioning level of each client that they serve. That's not actually, and they're dealing with the same issue as us, like how can we do this remotely? But they've moved beyond that and said, even if we don't have that, we're struggling to identify our clients' educational level because we need to place them in training. As you know, there have been numerous unemployment insurance claims coming in through DEED. A lot of these people are trying to get retrained, are taking this opportunity to take advantage of training. So they're going or remotely accessing the workforce centers, and the workforce centers want to place them in training, but they're having difficulty doing that because they have no way to assess their educational or academic level. So what I'm asking each of you is if you know of anything that they could possibly use online, paper, pencil, please chat it in the chat right now. I've heard that Read Theory provides like an initial assessment that maybe they could use. If there's anything else you know of, does not have to be NRS approved. It does not have to be necessarily offered remotely. It's just anything they could use to help get some idea of the level, academic level their client is at. So I'm going to, thank you, Christine. Just wait a little, and if people could think and just type in some possibilities that they could use, I'd really appreciate it, because they are really looking to adult basic education as the educational provider under WIOA to assist them with this. Oh, I'm seeing the RAT, the 9 and 10. Yep, these are good suggestions. Please keep them going throughout. Great. So please, keep chatting them in there. I'm going to compile it and send it to them later on today. But for now, we can move on to the next slide, Brad. DEED, the Adult Career Pathways Unit at DEED came out with guidance for their adult career pathway providers. That is attached in the materials section of this webinar. Just a few highlights in reading that is they are extending the grants. So please review it. I know a lot of ABE programs are a part of these grants. They may not be the ones receiving the guidance and messaging from DEED, but it would be helpful if you knew the flexibility that DEED is allowing with these grants. And at the end of that document, it also describes an electronic onboarding procedure for new clients that our partners are now using to do intake for new clients. So it would be worth reading and reviewing. And next slide, I think that's it, actually. Yep, back to you, Brad.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julie.
Yeah.
I'm impressed by all the information that that everyone has compiled. So thank you, Julie, Jody, the whole team. You've done an outstanding job. So now we're going to turn it over to you, and I'm really going to have, I'll need Astrid to help me out here. And we're going to be asking now for your questions in the audience. What questions do you have that we can address, or maybe others in the audience could address?
Okay, Brad. So we've had a couple of questions already chatted in throughout the webinar. I think many of them have already been addressed. A number of questions about counting asynchronous hours, and just to reiterate what Jody said, and to clarify based on the chat, asynchronous contact with student cannot be counted as contact hours. Those can only be counted as proxy hours as part of when using an approved distance learning platform. And as Susan said, the distance learning team and our team are exploring the options for some teacher verified model and use of learning management systems, but currently that is not in place. We also had a question regarding differences between privacy issues for K-12 and adults. Todd, I don't know if you maybe want to respond to that question.
Sure, Esther, thank you. You know, I think that's it's really a sort of a tricky question for us to navigate in adult basic ed, because we aren't all working for the same employer, as is the case with everybody who works in the Min-State system. And so that guidance that we shared that's included with the materials in this webinar, that, you know, is direct guidance coming from Min-State's legal folks to everybody who works in that system. In our case, most of us in adult basic ed work for school districts and would be beholden to data privacy guidelines issued by school districts. And of course, those policies are likely very K-12 centric and may not also exactly work for adult basic education. And so I guess our hope in sharing the example that Julie had posted, the link to the federal data privacy site and the guidance from Min-State, that programs could sort of use that to inform their own decisions and staff about issues around recording students working, posting those recordings online, who they can be shared with, and perhaps you can sort of use that to some of the ideas in those materials to enhance what you are receiving from your school district. Sorry, I can't give a more clear answer on that. It's sort of this, as a quote system, if you will, we kind of fall between the lines on getting really clear guidance on online data privacy issues.
Thank you, Todd. We also had a question from earlier. Emily asked a great question about how folks are getting paper-based materials out to students. Are you sending them? Are you emailing them? We do have a section coming up in a bit for sharing practices. So while we take some of the other questions, just to ask people to chat in what's working for you all in getting those paper-based materials. We have a question and concern about getting the 5-year narrative in on time and the quality of what can be submitted, and a question about moving that due date. Jody, do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah, for that question. I have been in touch with several of you who are working on a 5-year narrative about this issue, and we as a team absolutely recognize that completely valid concern. One thing to know is that the due date and sort of that 5-year cycle for the narrative is required in statute. So it is not a simple thing to change that. Plus, we have a cohort of consortia every year who do that, which spreads the work out both for our team and for the reviewers across the field. And it becomes quite problematic if we try to make 1 year's cohort twice as big. So at this point, I think it is very unlikely that there will be a change to that 5-year narrative due date. That being said, if you are working on a 5-year narrative, please know that we can all see how this, our new normal that's so different than our old normal obviously will have some pretty profound impact on your programming, and somehow we will have to, that will be reflected in the narrative. I will reach out to the cohort of you who are working on the narrative currently to talk about that more. Like, we are going to have to figure that out together of what exactly is that, what impact will it have, and what does that mean for the documents in your narrative. So just know that I'll be reaching out to you all to figure that out, and also know your narrative will be reviewed by our state team and by other people in our ABE field who are listening in on this webinar, and we all know about this big disruption and change. So while yes, this changes some of the things you might be writing and including in that 5-year narrative, it doesn't change. It doesn't mean that there would be any risk of that narrative, being seen as unacceptable, or it doesn't put your future funding or approval for funding at risk. I know that's not, maybe not the easy answer that we'd like, but that is sort of the reality of where the answer stands at this time. And if you're working on a narrative, just be waiting within, hopefully next week or within the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to reach out to all of you, and we'll start to think about it and talk about it more.
Thanks, Jody.
There was a quick follow-up that Sarah asked about that. She was wondering if maybe they should make some sort of statement about the impacts of COVID-19 in their narrative.
Yes, I think that absolutely makes sense. There's no way for us to just ignore it, for sure. And it obviously is having a profound impact. So yeah, I think definitely you should plan on that, Sarah. And I think we will need to, I will work on convening that narrative cohort. So all of the consortia that are working on a narrative this year, I think we'll want to talk about that together, about what exactly that looks like. So be watching for communication from me on that.
And Jody, before you leave, there's just another question, follow-up about reporting period and tables that are included. Question from Susan Wentkamp-Brandt. Could they also include data reports that reflect a different period of time similar to the A1 report?
I think that's certainly a possibility, Susan. I think, I totally follow your train of thought. We have not had the opportunity to give that any, thoughtful consideration yet. But yes, that's exactly kind of what I'm thinking about over the next couple of weeks, to figure out what those adjustments might look like, and then communicate that clearly to the cohort of folks who are working on the narrative. So yeah, definitely a possibility.
Jody, this is Todd.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I'm just wondering if I could just add, I just want to emphasize to folks that, a big part of what is driving those decisions is just there have been no changes to fiscal processes at the Department of Education. And consequently, in order to ensure that funds are available for all ABE consortia on July 1 of 2020, we have to keep pace with the grant-making processes that the Department of Education has in place. So I guess I just wanted to add that, a big part of what Jody is trying to do is keep us all on pace to make sure there's no question that we meet all those timelines and funds are available July 1. Thanks, Jody.
Yep, thanks, Todd. That makes sense.
Great, thank you. A number of questions about volunteers and volunteers generating hours. As we've mentioned a couple of times, our same policy still stands. So volunteers that have gone through the approved training to generate contact hours per our volunteer training policy could still be generating hours in that way. And another question was asked about when Literacy Minnesota might have training for volunteers up and running again. And Susan responded that that won't be able to happen until the closures have ended. Brad, do you want to say anything else about volunteers and volunteer training policy?
No, I feel like that covers it fairly well for the moment.
Okay. Then Brad, we had another question, just looking for any more information about what we can tell GED students right now about the future of testing.
Yeah, good question, Laura. So with GED testing, I think what we can safely say at this point is that it is unlikely that many GED testing centers will be opening up again here in the month of April. And unfortunately, that is really frustrating for our students. But again, this is a moving target. Everything is kind of adjusting. And so we have to kind of deal with some uncertainty at this point. I think it's a big challenge, and that's when we get into the discussion later. I do want to hear how folks are keeping their GED and diploma students motivated during this time. One thing you could be thinking about as you're working with GED students right now is also think about, just like you would maybe in class time periods, what if they didn't pass that GED test? Maybe then they might want to be preparing for the standard adult diploma. So as you're preparing them, could you be doing work that helps them prepare for the GED? But if testing isn't available in time, could a standard adult diploma be an option in this case? And could your program kind of shift to that if you have that option available? Otherwise, it is going to be kind of a wait and see with GED testing. So not much of a clear answer, Laura, I apologize, but we do need to prioritize our goals of safety.
Thanks, Brad. Then we had another question about if a program's been saving some funds for a spring project, would it be possible to carry over funds into the new year, next year? And Todd chatted in a reminder that programs may spend up to 20% of current year state funds in the first quarter of next year.
Can I, Astrid, this is Jody. I just wanted to acknowledge Joyce. I am really glad you asked that question. And I actually had one point had thought, oh, I should mention that when talking about funding, and it didn't make it into the slides. So I'm really glad you brought it up. And I do think that's important for people to remember. If you had money for a project or something in special that will not happen now, think about repurposing that money. And yes, you can use it this fiscal year, and you can use up to 20% of your total state award in the first 3 months of next fiscal year. So that's July, August, and September. So definitely be thinking, if you're gonna have those state funds left over, think about repurposing them. Maybe it's time to buy a set of Chromebooks that could be loaned out to students. But yes, you've got a little more time to spend up to 20% of your total state award.
And then Julie, question, if we haven't spent down regional funds, guidance on that one. Do you want us to speak to that?
That's fine. If there are projects and you can't repurpose them for transitions related activities, you do not have to spend the full amount. That money will go back into the ABE system.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And then Scott has an important reminder that 20% as a consortium can be carried over. So if you have various members, you need to be working together to make decisions about funding. And then I think a final question we haven't addressed yet was a question about what planning is taking place, looking ahead to a time when we can return to in-person programming, what planning is in place to do that safely. Todd, I don't know if at the agency level that is part of the dialogue that's happening, or whether really the focus is still currently just on the distance education period.
Sure. So I think this is really just sort of my take on this. The way that the public school closures worked was the governor technically granted the commissioner the authority to make that decision. But clearly they're working in close synchronization. And as the governor indicated yesterday, he didn't make a declarative statement about this, but he certainly inkled that it's likely the public schools will stay closed through the end of the school year. And I think the expectation is basically that whatever applies to the K-12 system will apply to the ABE system. And so frankly, I think as yet, the vast majority of energy is being dedicated to trying to scale up distance ed, given that it's going to be in place likely for 2 full months plus across the state in most systems. And I think we won't see I think we'll see a shifting focus to trying to make decisions and provide guidance around going back to more in-person interactions. But I think for now we just kind of have to stay tuned and watch for those. It's a great question. And I think it will increasingly be occurring to other people to start asking that question as well. So we will at the MDE office, we'll keep track of what the agency leadership are saying, what the governor is saying, and certainly we can have those conversations beginning within the ABE community as we think about returning to in-person programming. But that is not going to have, almost certainly at this point, I think is not going to happen for at least a few months.
Thanks, Todd. Jody, we also have a question about the program improvement timeline for those that are currently in program improvement. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes. Thank you, Julie, for asking that question. And I owe you an email, Julie, on this very topic. So I'll just recognize that. So for programs that are currently in the program improvement cohort for this year, no timelines have changed. However, obviously the work, the work has changed. And we recognize that, for many of you working on these goals of increased student retention and making sure that students are post-testing right away when they hit 40 hours, we cannot be working on those goals currently. So again, I have this issue on my radar, and I will be reaching out to the cohort of programs that are currently required to be participating in program improvement. Back in our old normal, before our new normal, my intention was to convene another webinar of that group, but now it seems like that may not make sense. But just be watching for some follow-up communication from me about next steps, and to kind of engage all of you who are in that cohort to think about what does program improvement, what do your plans look like now in our new normal. So, definitely any program improvement work that you are doing is no longer at the top of your priority list, and I get that. But I will be in touch over the next couple weeks to talk about next steps with that.
Scott, Helen, I see you have your hand up. I've unmuted you. If you want to unmute on your end, you can share your comment or question.
So Todd, you were talking about the coming back to in-person, and I know that's an unanswerable question at this point, but I guess I just wanted to bring forth the thinking about the fact that K-12 is gonna do what they're gonna do, and there's gonna come like a break point where even if in-person makes sense in coming back, that it won't make sense for them to bring students back. Say there's like 3 weeks or 4 weeks left, there'll come a point where it doesn't make sense to bring students back to the fold. But just the fact that, are we as ABE going to look at that differently and understand that we're a program that runs throughout the entire year, and that we may come back prior to the end of the school year, even if K-12 isn't, if the the shifting in society is more of a person-to-person contact? I know that's not something that you can answer at this moment, but I just want to see if that's going to be part of the thought process.
Yeah, Scott, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And yeah, I think we're thinking the same thing, that there, particularly when it comes to summer programming, there's likely a point at which the decisions and guidance that are being made relative to K-12 instruction might diverge from what makes sense for adult basic ed. And so, you know, I think at that point, likely we would lean more heavily on the guidance that that the governor is providing directly to folks, perhaps, you know, keeping track of some of our partners like the Min-State system. For example, one could imagine that if they're back to in-person programming, we definitely want to be there with them doing that as well, I think. So yeah, thanks for making that point. And really, you know, just frankly, even for me, it's interesting to hear folks raising these questions. I think it's a great idea to start thinking about what does it mean? How do we make those decisions? How do we go about phasing back into in-person instruction? I honestly haven't been thinking about those things myself, but I appreciate having that kind of get moved up on my to-do list to think about. And yeah, so I think good for all of us to maybe at least start spending some time thinking about that. And we will definitely be mindful that the interests of ABE programs and school districts may diverge over time as we go forward.
Thank you, Todd. Excellent questions. Because of the time, I just want to recognize that just want to kind of close out a little bit and say that we have not yet scheduled a next check-in webinar. We are likely not going to do a check-in webinar next week, just so you know. And I want to remind you that all of this recording, the resources and materials for today's session will be at mnabe.org under State ABE Presentations. I want to thank you all for participating today and for all of your ongoing hard work. Thank you all so much. We will stay on the line right now, but I do think we could stop recording, and we will